Hey folks, it's Ben. I'm here with a Grand Prix project day. It's not an emergency repair. It's really probably ought to get to it sooner than later repair. We're going to be changing the rear springs and struts on my 2002 Pontiac Grand Prix. I'm going to try to make this video with as least narration as possible, see how that goes. At least on the editing standpoint, it'll be easier. Purchased these from Rock Auto, mainly because I could not get them locally cheaper. These are 50 bucks a piece from Rock Auto. They are the stock everything size. They're 50 bucks, and then it was like 50 bucks a piece to ship them. So for 200 bucks, I could get the pair plus some other stuff. I got some O2 sensors we'll talk about later. Locally, I think I could get the pair for like 250. So it's like 50 bucks, you know, I'm not in a rush. Ended up going that route. They are left and right, oddly, because they have the sway bar connections on either side, so honestly they seem like they'd fit on either side, but we'll go with the left-right thing. And I'll tell you why we're doing it. The wind noise is fairly bad, so I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum here. But what we're seeing is that as you're driving the car, we're now starting to bottom out a little bit more than we used to. And like any W-body Grand Prix, Monte Carlo, Buick Regal, whatever, I have butt sag, where the bottom of my car is lower than the front. So this will help address some of that. And also, if you notice, my wheel is tilted in a little bit on the top, and that's because the springs are no longer holding it as straight as high as they used to be, and that's causing some irregular tire wear, where I'm starting to eat the inside of the tire a little bit more than I am in the back on both sides. So both are similar. So we're just gonna change the struts and springs out. If you buy them as an assembly, it should be fairly easy. Famous last words, always. I think besides the lug nuts, we're gonna be 6 bolts in. It's 3 up top, and I think 2 here and a sway bar. So we'll just cut to the other side. I'll do that side first. I'll tripod you, and I'll probably narrate the first one a little, and then we'll do a time lapse on this side. Welcome to the wheel well. The 6 bolts in question that we're gonna be dealing with today, and hopefully just the 6. I haven't actually researched on how to do it. I'm just kind of looking at it and seeing what I need to do. We've got these 2 large bolts here that are obviously metric. I don't have metric that fits that big enough, so right now I think I've got it. I think that's a 11/16. Now this bolt, the nut is a hex, but the other side just has 2 flats, and then it's curved on the others. 11/16 fits super tight, but it does fit. And then I have a 7/8, which is kind of loose, but we'll see how we do with it. Ideally, you'd want to, I think it's like a 21 metric, and an impact would probably take it right off. I don't have a lot of air. I do have an impact wrench if things get hairy, but we'll try to take it off by hand at first. So we have these 2 that actually hold the lower part of the strut to, I'm going to call it the bearing assembly. I'm sure it has a technical term, but I just can't come up with it right now. And then we also have our sway bar attachment link right here, so we'll need to undo this one as well. And then there are just 3 nuts that are actually in the trunk, and I'll take you up there when we do it to undo. So that's what we're doing. I have some screw loose sprayed on these already to hopefully give them a little love. But honestly, I think our biggest fight's gonna be right here, getting this tube out of this knuckle here. It's been there for years, it's dirt in and everything, and I gotta spray some stuff on it. It's probably covered in dirt. That'll be the biggest fight, honestly. We might have to get the pneumatic hammer out for that if I had to take a guess as to where the fight is. I think everything else should be fairly good. These are going to be suspension bolts, so they're probably grade 8, so they're probably pretty tough. We will need to reuse the bolts, but in this video, this is what you're going to see, is me removing, probably in this order, these 2 and this, and see if we can get some looseness going on. Once we get this kind of loose, then we'll take the top 3 off and see what we can do to get it completely out. So enjoy. Here we go. So at this point, we're going to go upstairs into the trunk and release the 3 bolts that are holding, the 3 nuts, I say, that are holding the strut in the car up top. And so we'll go up there. These are 15 millimeter. Probably be faster with a ratchet. So those are done. You get new nuts with the new strut assembly, so we don't need to keep those. Question for the hive mind. See how sloppy the caulking is? Like, there's obviously a lot of dust through here because I drive on gravel roads, but that doesn't quite look factory to me compared to, say, the passenger side, which is like factory. This car was involved in an accident at some point in its life, but like nothing's damaged there, but that's just sloppy as heck. But it could be crappy GM build quality. Not sure. Let me know in the comments if you think that's a pile of crap, like it's been repaired, which would not surprise me given the rust on this car. Or yeah, just, you know, mine are the same way and they're crappy. Just a note would be awesome. Thanks. You actually have to get in, and there's a flat that should be right here that would actually lock it, and then I can use my wrench to free that out and get that out, and hopefully I can see where I'm bumping against the sway bar as well, so that's not awesome, but we'll figure it out. So what I'm dealing with right now is, I think we're gonna be able to wiggle it out, but up top here, you can see where, right there, right? So we're gonna push down on this a little bit and get it to kick forward, and it should peel out, and hopefully we're gonna put that other one in the same way. My camera just hit here, will that work for me? Removal wasn't too gross, actually. It actually came out okay, given the fact that I didn't even have the correct tools. The new one should go in a lot easier. We'll clean up our fasteners on the bench grinder and the wire wheel to make sure everything goes together nice again. As I said before, we get new nuts on top, so we don't have to worry about those. New rubber padding. Looks like that rubber cup that goes over the top, I'll have to figure out how to get that on and get those bolts back on. Looking at the 2 new ones, the only difference between the left and the right is the up bolting. So notice we have a stud here, nothing here, stud here. So obviously that's the difference. So obviously the manufacturer doesn't really care. They're just kind of, but they are specific to each side. But I'm sure as a person you could make one fit the other side if you had to. The factory one, which this one's definitely factory, is only made for one side. I say it's definitely factory because if we come around to the head end of it here, that's definitely a factory sticker. When they say computer, you know, set, that's exactly what they mean, is this little, you know, computer figured out with the other one so that you get an equal set of springs on your car. Back in the olden days, you'd actually have to compress the spring and take the strut out, and there's a whole hot mess of stuff. But now you can just buy the whole assembly, which is fairly safe. Here's a warning label saying, don't undo that nut, because it's just a spring and a shock, right? And that shock keeps the spring from exploding, so don't undo the shock. And we're not even gonna bother. We're just gonna take this assembly and she's going back up in the car. My game plan for reassembly is going to be to put the strut back up into the strut tower, I guess if you'll call it that, and get the base back down here. This surface is actually fairly clean. I will use an anti-seize slash corrosion preventative on all of this material here. These were neat, these bolts that actually held the strut in because they're pressed in to a degree. See what I mean by there's only two flats. So we'll have to hammer those in to a degree, but the nut should be able to pull it back in. These right here, we're not going to put crazy tight. I don't have an actual torque value for you. You'll have to look it up on your own. But they weren't that tight because we have this rubber gasket right here. So we're not going to squish the heck out of that. So they're fairly tight. These here, we'll put Jesus tight. Because they don't need to move, and their whole point is just to be rigid and keep the strut connected to this knuckle down here. So we'll do that. We're not quite bending our fuel line, but brake line, but it's pretty tight, but it's actually being held up by the suspension. And then I might need to use the jack to get this sway bar link back up to its hole. That'll actually be the last thing I connect in. So it'll be the three up here. I'll get them connected. I'll probably tighten these down, tighten those up there, and then we'll put the sway bar back on. And that's that for this side, hopefully. So let me tripod you up and let's do it. There. On either side.
Right, it's just the top bolty patterny thing that's different.
Yep. Good then. There you have it. We've got the upper bolts installed. You saw me take the brake caliper off. I was putting a little bit of stress on this line, trying to get the suspension down enough to get this onto the knuckle. So I just disconnected it. It's only two 13mm bolts. Set it aside. Set on the parking brake and the trailing arm here. Everything went in as planned. Those upper bolts are fairly tight, but not super tight. Like not. Doesn't take a lot of effort to get them off, but they are tight. These are on super tight, enough that I can't move them with my little wrench anymore, because you saw me take them off. It required me to use a hammer. because they're pressed in on this side kind of, and that's what the nut holds the other side on. So they're super tight and everything's clenched up nice and tight here as well. And of course, once you remember to use a wrench on the back like I had forgotten initially, that tightens up real nice, and it wasn't actually hard to move, so that's pretty good as well. So this side's ready to wrap up, where I'll throw the wheel and tire back on and tighten up the lug nuts. And I will set the camera back on the other side, and I'll just shoot a time lapse, and hopefully that'll give you a quick overview on everything's what you need to do. I'm thinking it's gonna take about an hour per side if you've never done it before, just to figure out. It's kind of tight between the sway bar and the strut. In fact, it's super tight even right now. They're kind of rubbing because the strut's down. This will come out as it comes up and it'll get off that sway bar. But that's just kind of how it goes. So let's look at the other side and hit it. All out took me an hour, so plan on 2 hours. Plan on 3 if you've never done it before, because you have to dig up all the wrenches and things and figure out how you're going to do it, and things that are particular to your car. A note, I already closed the trunk, but there's a little rubber cap that goes on top of the strut, and you saw it on the first video when I ripped it off. The strut has to be a little loose for it to get in, and then you kind of tighten the nuts and it seals it on there. It makes getting this bolt the hardest of the whole deal, is this upper strut bolt that's towards the fender. It's real hard to get to with a wrench, and it's too shallow to get in there with a ratchet. So that was kind of a pain. Everything else is actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. I mean, it's straightforward, but it did what it was supposed to do. Picked up about 1 inch so far in the rear, but we got to give it a little time to settle in, bounce around a little bit. So we'll have it on the road and do some cool stuff. But that's how you change the rear struts on a 2002 Pontiac Grand Prix. That's how I do it anyway. Any questions, go ahead and ask them in the comment section. If you have any comments, leave those as well. Subscribe to my channel, Turbo231, for more awesome videos on my 2002 Pontiac Grand Prix. And we're still, working on the probe. Haven't worked on it since I shot the last video, but August is my month, so let's get this done here. And I will see you guys next time. I think we'll do a slow-mo with the cards. We'll see if this thing will start. Of course it'll start, but let's see how friendly it will start.